Howdy, this is Andrew Bassler for my Climate Change Ecology 430 project, Climate Change and Potential Impacts on Anadromous Fish Migration. Question, how or will climate change impact anadromous fish migration? What are the phenological impacts? How is this going to affect the timing of salmon runs? How will it affect the thermal limits of salmon? They die about above 70 degrees, so it's warming. How is this going to impact them? Will it affect how they swim? Does it affect how they migrate? The food web linkage, plankton, upswelling, cold ocean. This is all linked together. Orcas, it all fits together. And the unique life history of salmon and steelhead present unique challenges with climate change and warming. Who cares? Well, anadromous fish like Chinook salmon or steelhead play a huge role in the Northwest. The Columbia River watershed is gigantic. It's near us. Salmon have a historical impact with Native Americans feeding. They redistribute nutrients, right? They're a huge cultural stalwart of the Northwest. Keystone species. It's well known that trees grow taller and greener where anadromous fish migrate, right? And it's also an economic driver of the region. Salmon, it's a huge part. Quick background. Anadromous fish are born in freshwater, migrate to saltwater as juveniles, adulthood in the ocean. So they're born here, swim downriver, spend 3 or 4 years in the ocean, swim home, spawn. Coho, sockeye, chum, pink, and chinook are the main 5 salmon species. They have different run timing as well. Fall chinook start migrating in the fall, and they lay their eggs in the fall, so they don't have to migrate very far. Spring chinook begin their migration in spring, migrate throughout the summertime, and then lay their eggs in the fall inland, right? So this is the migration corridor over the summer, which is dammed. So this is a problem with thermal limits. 2 years ago, or a couple years ago, a sockeye run was completely decimated because it got over 70 degrees in this Columbia River. And like I said, it's complicated. There's tons of dams. They can release water out of Dvorak to cool the runs, but that increases dissolved oxygen, which is bad for fish. It's crazy. So there's a lot of variables in this. Quick little review of the life cycle. So cute. Okay. Freshwater, estuary, saltwater, freshwater. And here's some salmon. This is their ocean phase. They're all silvery, but once they hit freshwater to spawn, they turn colors. My materials I looked at one main research paper done at the University of Idaho. Talked about Chinook salmon thermal exposure histories. And then 3 recent studies published in the Progress in Oceanography, Fisheries Research, and Ecological Modeling journals. First one, Zhang from the U of I. Good. About mean stream temperature increases and how this is going to affect distribution of Chinook and steelhead. So this is juvenile Chinook, juvenile steelhead. Remember, as adults, they're just spawning here. So as a juvenile, this is thermals, below optimal, stressful warmth, right? This is 19 degrees C. This is right near 70. Notice that on Chinook, we have a 15 C, 13 C for steelhead. So we have slightly different thermal tolerances here, but we can look at the differences where they're going to be. It's also with Zhang et al. It's about steelhead and Chinook salmon and the nonlinear response to warming, right? Steelhead might have a different response to this warmth. There's been some thoughts that steelhead could do better for a couple years or a couple decades, and then we see declines in population. So if we look steelhead red, Chinook blue, mean temperature right here, about 12 degrees C, we see some major declines in survivability. Chinook, not quite as steep, and it starts a little bit higher up. So they have different thermal tolerances. Then we look at discharge, right? KCFS would be thousands of cubic feet per second. Steelhead and Chinook have different preferences in terms of discharge. So more discharge, more water. Precipitation's unpredictable, but doing research on it to see how they react. Some more from Zhang et al. We look at Chinook salmon, steelhead, box and whisker plots here. Just survival rate on the Y, different RCP scenarios on the X. Just real easy to look at. We notice at 2080 clearly mass drop-offs, but not too bad up here. And I'm just wondering if that's because we're already starting with a pretty low bar. Chinook and steelhead populations are depressed severely, like severely. Hundreds, thousands of fish left, right, in some populations. So we're working from a pretty low bar here, but survivability rates like 1%, right? Like that's not good. Kiefer et al. The next one talks about migrating salmon and how they use their energy reserves and their mass that is lost while they migrate, right? If they can't migrate to their spawning grounds because they're losing too much mass and dying, that's a problem. So we look at these box and whiskers, gray with warming, projected warming in terms of mass loss, right? So they're losing more mass, losing more energy. This is summer and spring Chinook, right? Short term, Streamtime Chinook may respond by altering their migration phenology. They might leave earlier because it's too hot. They might have to start migrating in the winter or something. Long term, salmon with different thermal variances will pass on their genes. Ones that are very sensitive to temperature and will die out, they will not pass on their phenotype and they will die out. Ones that are more resilient will pass on their genetic material. Next one, this one's awesome. Wilson talking about steelhead, Oncorus micus, phenology and marine survival. 3 main parts here: river exit date, biological spring transition, size of fish. So we look at river exit date. If they're exiting the river about day 130, a lot of survivability. Biological spring transition date, it's the day it's linked with upswelling and the enrichment of the ocean habitat with phytoplankton and zooplankton. And so that when that happens, that's the biological spring transition date. When this time's right with river exit date, salmon will have lots to eat, right? That's the idea here, is food availability. If they miss that upswelling, that BST, they're probably going to be skinnier and not be able to return. And then they come back and the rivers are warm and then they lose more mass, right? It just kind of dominoes. But cool stuff. Some more Wilson stuff with the steelhead. This is just plotting a lot of probability of survival and optimal river exit date, and also this biological transition date. How these connect to each other. Survivability, we look over here, lots of different data, but they're examining this relationship, seeing it how it affects salmon. Some more variables in the model and the importance of each variable in the model. We look at, of course, SST, sea surface temperature is going to be important. Swelling transition date, 16%. But this also takes in the account the Pacific decadal oscillation, right? Talks about El Nino, La Nina. It talks about that. Ecosystem indicators, transition dates. But also look at, we looked at discharge and other studies right here. Columbia River discharge. ENSO, more El Nino stuff. So in this model, it takes in a lot of different things. Fork length is big too, right? Size of fish. Okay, last one I looked at. I'm talking about kind of like the economic harvest perspective, not just, of course we want to save our salmon, but there's a lot of a lot of harvest importance in this. And this is in Alaska with larger abundance numbers. And they wanted to know if they could project the size of the runs, which would be nice based on temperature. Sometimes they see a huge surge of fish coming upriver and they don't know how much of the runs passed. Maybe that's the whole run and they missed their opportunity to harvest some. Maybe that's, it'd be nice to know how much run passed. Was that 75%, 25%? So they wanted to quantify this run timing and develop a run timing forecast model. Using their research, there wasn't a real run size timing relationship, but they did notice that earlier migrations occur in years with warmer spring temperatures, which makes sense, right? When we talk about phenology, having to migrate when the temperature changes. They got to get upriver. If it's getting too warm, they got to go. Conclusions. Anadromous fish life cycles, it's difficult to project because their life histories are so diverse: freshwater, saltwater, different habitats. Spring Chinook, right? That's the one that's getting hammered the hardest because their life history is so unique and so difficult, and they need cold water. Cold water is not a thing anymore. Okay, phenology is important, right? The upswelling. Salmon don't even eat the plankton, but other animals do. It's a part of the puzzle. Warming affects just about every life stage. And I also learned that it could be a good harvest management tool. That projecting runs was important, right? If we're harvesting too many fish, that's a problem, but we still have to harvest some. It's a huge economic driver, so I get it. So it was really eye-opening to study all of these things they're analyzing and how they impact salmon. Thank you for watching. Here is my bibliography and all of the media I used. I appreciate you checking me out. Thank you.